the manual, and let's go through it. So it says you can actually read it. It's household manual. Has an introduction, blah, blah, blah. These are the rules of the house. The first thing is grooming and guest relations. So, ironically, the chapter 1 of the Epstein estate is grooming and guest relations. I don't know if Ghislaine was cracking up when he wrote, or when she wrote this title, if she's like, perfect. But only I know why. So grooming and guest relations. The manual says appearance is extremely important if high standards are to be maintained. A favorable first impression goes a long way. Personal cleanliness, good presentation, and a genuine and polite aim to please approach are very important. So some rules include try and anticipate the needs of Mr. Epstein, Miss Maxwell, and their guests. Make guests feel pampered and welcome. Always address the guest by their name, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, for example. Do not discuss personal problems with guests. Be cautious of voice levels. Unobtrusiveness is key. This is the rule that Juan Patricio pointed out in the trial that made me want to look into the guest manual. So he says one of the rules was, quote, remember that you see nothing. Remember that you see nothing. Hear nothing, say nothing, except to answer a question directed at you. Respect their privacy. Now, I realize there are 2 ways to take this manual, and both of these ways may have come into play. So the first way is that rich and very wealthy, powerful people live differently and expect different things than an average Joe like myself. And I've had a little bit of taste of being in the presence of a couple wealthy, powerful people. I've never worked for them. I've never been a housekeeper, been in their house, but I do know there's this air of properness and respect and cleanliness and rules to be followed. There are rules. So I'm sure there are other very powerful people that have rule books like this for their housekeepers, where it's you say this when you answer the phone, you don't see anything, don't hear anything, don't say anything unless you're spoken to. Very direct, very, this is the rules, and I expect this level to be upheld properly and precisely. So I don't think this manual is that weird per se for a billionaire to be giving their housekeepers. I think it's just rich people shit. The other way to take this would be that Ghislaine and Jeffrey Epstein didn't want anything leaving the house that happened there. What happens at the Epstein estate stays at the Epstein estate. And these rules, if they were followed, would not... nothing would be divulged from the house if they were followed. And also, so one of the things that Ghislaine's lawyers tried to claim is that Ghislaine was not an equal to Epstein. She was someone that worked for Epstein. She didn't have the same availabilities and the same privileges and the same opportunities as Epstein just because she was living with him and doing some business with him. They weren't partners. It was an employer-employee relationship. Ghislaine didn't know what was going on. In this book, in Grooming and Guest Relations, it says, try to anticipate the needs of Mr. Epstein, Miss Maxwell, and their guests. So not Mr. Epstein and his guests, but on the same line, number 1, first thing you see, Mr. Epstein, Miss Maxwell, and their guest. The rules portray them as equals. Ghislaine is not being portrayed as a victim like her defense would have you believe. This guest manual points to them as being equals. They are partners. This is a very partner-based manual. It's me and Mr. Epstein, and don't fucking disobey us. If I was employing someone, my name would be first on the manual and then their name would be after, or if in the manual at all. But the first line, it says, anticipate the needs of Mr. Epstein and Miss Maxwell and their guests. Someone who works for me in my house doesn't have guests. My gardener or my housekeeper or my dog walker is not inviting people as guests over to my house. Do you get that? This was just as much Ghislaine's space as it was Jeffrey Epstein, and she was allowed in all the areas that the housekeepers weren't. She's allowed to have access to everything. She was not a victim. She was a partner of Jeffrey Epstein, and I believe it was romantically and professionally. So she was not a victim. Her defense tried to paint her as a victim. She was not. It also goes on to say the second section of the book is proper language. And it says, proper language. What you say is just as important as what you do, which is actually good advice. If this wasn't like a manual of how to keep pedophiles on the down low, there's actually be some solid advice in here. So it says, what you say is not as important as what you do. Your language must include good diction and exclude swear words and slang. Pay attention to how you speak to Mr. Epstein and Miss Maxwell. Again, pay attention to how you speak to Mr. Epstein and Miss Maxwell. She's not a victim. She's not an employee. She's a fucking partner. You do not say, quote, yeah, sure, no problem, you bet, gotcha. You do say, yes, Mr. Epstein, of course, Miss Maxwell, my pleasure, no trouble at all. To compliment, you say, thank you, Miss Epstein, I enjoy doing this. You are very kind. This is very Get Out-esque. I feel like this is the manual in the movie Get Out with Jordan Peele. I feel like this is the manual that the white family would give their housekeeper that they did a brain transplant with and had them under mind control. You are very kind. Well, thank you, sir. I enjoy doing it. I am very sorry, sir. It will not happen again. It was completely my fault, Miss Maxwell. I will make the changes immediately. Another very important rule if you're trying to maintain a pedophilic empire is when entering a room, you say, may I come in? That is very important because if Jeffrey Epstein is on a call with a business partner or currently being massaged by a 14-year-old, you need to say, may I come in? You can't just disturb the people who live at the house. And same with Miss Maxwell. You know, if she's looking at her Excel sheet of expenses or her Excel sheet of names for future targets, you can't just walk in. You got to say, please, may I come in, Miss Maxwell? Please, may I come in, Mr. Epstein? And that is when he puts the towel on, throws the girl in the closet and says, yes, you can. Thank you for asking.